You've heard the story. Columbus discovered America in 1492. The Pilgrims landed on an empty continent. Settlers arrived in a wild, untouched wilderness and built a civilization from scratch. It's a tidy story, and it's also almost completely wrong. Before Columbus ever set foot here, North America was home to over 1,000 civilizations. They had governments older than the U.S. Constitution, a city bigger than medieval London, irrigation that modern Phoenix still uses today, trade networks stretching from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico. This wasn't a vacant wilderness waiting to be discovered. It was a continent of nations, and the country America became was built right on top of them, often borrowing ideas they barely understood. To explain this better, let me take you to the summer of 1744 in a hot courthouse in Pennsylvania, where an Onondaga tribe's chief was about to quietly school Benjamin Franklin on how to run a country. But first, some context. The Northeast, from the Atlantic coast to the Mississippi, was home to 25 major tribal nations speaking 3 language families: Algonquian, Iroquoian, and Siouan. The biggest coalition among them was the Iroquois Confederacy, or Haudenosaunee, uniting 6 nations: Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, and Tuscarora. They lived in bark longhouses that held 100 people. They were matrilineal. Property and lineage passed through the mother, and clan mothers had the power to select and remove chiefs, and they governed themselves using a 117-article constitution called the Great Law of Peace, which some historians trace back to 1142 CE, making it arguably the oldest continuous participatory democracy on Earth. And in some ways, their system was more balanced and participatory than the British colonial governments of the time. Now, let's get back to the Treaty of Lancaster in 1744. An Onondaga leader named Canassatego stood up in front of British colonial officials, with Franklin's printer taking notes, and gave them some very unsolicited advice.
You fight amongst yourselves like children pulling at the same blanket. Our wise forefathers established union between the 6 nations. This has made us formidable.
Formidable. Got it. Keep going.
One arrow breaks easily. Bound together? Try. You cannot. Observe our methods. You will acquire strength.
13 arrows bound together. That's going to play well.
You wish to survive the French, the world that is coming? Then stop being 13 fires. Be one.
Franklin printed that speech. He circulated it across the colonies. 10 years later, he proposed the Albany Plan of Union. The first real blueprint for united colonies was likely influenced by the Iroquois model. Decades after that, when the framers designed a federal government with separate branches, shared defense, and self-governing states, the structure looked awfully familiar. Even the Great Seal of the United States, an eagle clutching 13 arrows, is Canassatego's exact metaphor. And in 1988, Congress passed a formal resolution acknowledging the Iroquois Confederacy's influence on the Constitution. But the government wasn't the only thing being engineered across this continent. 1,000 miles south, sitting on the Mississippi floodplain near modern-day St. Louis, was a city called Cahokia. From above, it looked like a planned city. Plazas, roads, and towering mounds dominating the skyline. At its peak, around 1100 CE, it held up to 20,000 people, larger than London or Paris at the time. It had 120 earthen pyramids, a central mound 100 feet tall, trade routes reaching from the Great Lakes to the Gulf Coast. From this Mississippian world came the great southeastern nations, the Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, and Seminole, inheritors of the mound building, the chiefdom politics, and the farming traditions that would later feed the entire South. And out in the Sonoran Desert of modern Arizona, another civilization was solving a much harder problem. How do you make a desert bloom?
2 feet of drop per mile. No more, no less. The water must flow, but it cannot erode.
How far does the full network run now?
Over 700 miles, 14 systems. Enough water for 80,000 of us.
And we dug it with sticks and baskets and stone.
We dug it with patience and math.
The Egyptians had the Nile, you know. The Romans had aqueducts.
Good for them. We have corn, cotton, and a city.
The Hohokam Canal network was the largest irrigation system in pre-Columbian North America. Over 700 miles of hand-dug channels built without draft animals, without metal tools, without wheels. Archaeologists rank it alongside ancient Egypt, ancient Rome, and ancient China. Around 1450 CE, the Hohokam civilization collapsed, likely from a mix of drought, floods, and exhausted soil. But their canals didn't disappear. When settlers arrived in Arizona in the 1860s, they found those ancient channels still carved into the earth and cleaned them out. One of the founders looked at this new settlement rising from the ruins of an older one and named it, literally, Phoenix. Today, 5 million people live on top of that Hohokam blueprint. The modern Arizona canal system still follows routes dug 1,000 years ago. Now, swing west and up. Along the Pacific coast, from Alaska down to Northern California, more than 70 tribes lived off the ocean. The Tlingit, the Haida, the Kwakiutl, the Chinook. They built cedar canoes 50 feet long that could carry 30 people and hunt otters, salmon, and whales. Their totem poles rose above permanent villages. They were wealthy, seriously wealthy. But their idea of power wasn't hoarding anything. It was giving it all away.
This copper is worth 40 canoes, passed down 3 generations.
Chief, please don't.
Now it's worth a legacy.
That was very expensive prestige.
A true chief dies poor and rich at the same time.
The Europeans are going to be so confused by us.
Good.
The potlatch was part feast, part economic system, part flex. Chiefs gave away blankets, canoes, food, sometimes destroying valuables publicly to prove they were wealthy enough not to need them. Status came from generosity, not accumulation. It was, in the most literal sense, the opposite of capitalism. European missionaries were so baffled by it that Canada officially banned potlatches from 1884 all the way until 1951. And way out on the Great Plains, yet another world was forming. The Sioux, really the Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota, along with the Cheyenne, Comanche, Crow, and Blackfoot, followed buffalo herds across 1,000 miles of grassland. After horses reached the continent, they became some of the fastest mounted warriors on Earth within a single generation. They used every piece of the buffalo, meat, hide, bone, sinew, organs, for food, shelter, clothing, and tools. Nothing wasted. So, a 117-article constitution before America had one. A city bigger than London. 700 miles of canals engineered with sticks and stone. An economy where wealth was proven by giving it away. A grasslands empire that mastered horseback in a generation. These were not empty lands. They were civilizations that had already figured out governance, engineering, economics, and sustainability centuries before anyone from Europe arrived and claimed to invent them. Today, 574 federally recognized tribes still carry those traditions forward. The country America became didn't replace those civilizations. It inherited them, their trade routes, their crops, their farming methods, their governing ideas, and, in some cities, their literal infrastructure. America wasn't built on empty land. It wasn't discovered. It was already built.
You just learned more in 5 minutes than Franklin learned in 10 years. The least you can do is subscribe.